Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. For registered nurse Kellie Ann Forbes, it began as a personal mission to better understand the devastating health impacts of smoking. Soon, though, it became a professional crusade to not only better inform patients about the risks of smoking, but to educate and share the wide variety of options available to help them quit. And one of those options is most certainly vaping. Kellie Ann's mission to make the truth about vaping common knowledge brought her and her medical colleagues into harsh disagreement over the entrenched anti-vaping dogma and misinformation that saturates the mainstream medical profession. And joining us today is Kellie Ann Forbes, the founder of VAEP, which I'm happy to say is one of the most active and trusted educational advocacy groups in vaping. Kellie Ann, thanks for coming on RegWatch.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I think that pleasure is all mine, and I'm certain that for our viewers too, you are literally one of the most requested guests ever for the show.
I was unaware of that. How many requests did you get?
More than a handful and less than 2 dozen.
Wow, yeah, I didn't realize that, but it's that's a compliment that people want to hear more from me and my project. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've definitely made an impact, and so let's hop right into this interview. Now, we're going to dive into your background and talk the details about the frontline battle you've been involved in now for several years with the medical community. But first, I want to know the lung hysteria. What's your assessment of it?
Well, I think that vaping has been utilized since 2004 when it was patented. It's gone through a lot of evolution since then. When people use the term vaping, we typically are talking about tobacco harm reduction. Just like if you say smoking, when someone says someone smokes, you don't think they're smoking, crack, right? So it's really an issue of terminology. I think that we have part of a problem here, but I think there is some very severe lung injuries that are happening from behaviors that people are doing. It seems quite clear that the vast majority have been identified, and even through self-reporting, that their THC concentrates have been obtained typically from the black market. It's very important, I think, to identify exactly what is making people sick. And therefore, I think they should be doing tox screens as opposed to self-reporting, because we know about 18% of patients that come into emergency and have used an illegal substance don't report, right? Because they're afraid of getting into trouble. But what patients need to understand is we're not here to judge, we're here to help you. So it's important to be very honest about your history and what you've used.
So when you say that they generally don't, they're not that honest when they self-report, let me ask you then, because U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has been leading this whole charge, and some would argue, I would certainly argue, the misinformation campaign. So at kind of the heart of it is not actually getting the right information from the patients in the hospital.
Well, that's a public health responsibility to be as definitive as possible on what exactly is causing an outbreak, right? So, I was an emergency room nurse for a while, and I know that my patients, when I would ask for their history and what meds and drugs they've taken, many times I would, discover that they were on narcotics or illicit drugs because we tested their urine, and they didn't divulge that information in their narrative to me and their reporting to me. And again, people, they just don't understand that health professionals are here to help you, and we need to understand what's gone into your body so that we can be appropriate with the drugs that we give you. So if you have something in your system, it may interact with what the doctor prescribes for you. So it's very important to be honest with us. But the data that I've found is that it's about 18% don't report when they've done illegal drugs. So for us to be sure, a tox screen, and it's very simple. It's just a urine dip. And we can test for, like, I think 8 different groups of narcotics, from opiates to cannabis or what have you.
So I think it's important right now to give people an overview, or actually some detail about your qualifications. So you're a nurse. What's your qualifications? What do you do? What kind of healthcare do you practice?
Well, most of my experience as an RN has been in the rural hospital in Alberta. Excuse me. So my areas that I specialized in were emergency acute care, palliative, a little bit of orthopedics. What I didn't do was maternity. That was just an area that didn't interest me, and I was very versatile in the rural hospital that I worked in. So I've dealt with the public for many years, giving care to them under many circumstances. Yeah.
Well, so that obviously is the core of your expertise in this area then.
Is floor nursing, yeah. Hands-on patient care, direct patient care, yeah.
Because there's a difference between public health and people who actually work one-on-one with patients. Public health is like population level or community level, and then there's nurses who work one-on-one.
I would say the vast majority of nurses work in the hospital and work for the government, right? But my career took a turn when I did my research on vaping. So back in, I think, 2014, I did initial research on vaping because I found it was the most effective strategy for me to stay off of cigarettes. But I wanted to understand what I was inhaling, so I did a ton of research on it, read 300 articles. And then that led to me understanding that there's a great deal of information, not only in the public, but amongst the health community. So then I became a vaping advocate, and I've been a vaping advocate for 5 years, and I've been working on VAEP, 50 to 70 hours a week for over the last year to build a resource that helps people learn easily so they can make an informed decision about vaping as a harm reduction strategy.
So you mentioned there was a little bit of a wall you hit there. Talk a little bit about how your colleagues, what kind of reception did you get when you started talking about vaping with patients?
Okay, so obviously my colleagues had about the same knowledge base as the public did, which is insufficient to make an informed decision. So, I would engage where I could in conversations and cite credible evidence, because that's what we're supposed to use as our resources for learning. So I would cite statistics or studies or any published articles, something that we consider credible. I was kind of disappointed that I didn't see the enthusiasm that I thought I would, because, we all really struggled with trying to help our patients quit smoking. We're very, very aware of the health effects of smoking. And most of us are aware that smoking is the most preventable cause of disease and death in Canada. But you have to understand that even though we have an ethical responsibility to our code of ethics as professionals, we also are working for agencies, usually universal healthcare. And our ethics may not always be well represented by the policies within the agencies we work.
So I get the sense you're being careful here, Kellie Ann.
Yes, I have to be very respectful of my colleagues, and I represent a profession. So it's important to me to not be malevolent in my wording and my message. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm required to come from a compassionate place. Okay, so I won't bash people or organizations or speak badly, and I have to be careful as to what kind of information I give, because I've had some challenges by my colleagues and by agencies that are in the medical field, and I just can't divulge confidential information, but I still want to be able to convey to the public truthful information. So I'm just going to be a little slow and careful with my wording so that I don't create new problems for myself. But I am being honest with people because I'm responsible to do that too. So it's a balance, right?
Yes, it's a balance.
There's a lot on the line with my license, right? And I worked very hard to become an RN, right?
So when you and I first started talking about this a couple of years ago, when we first met, I was astonished by how threatened your livelihood may be if you continue to be an advocate.
Yes, very much. So, so if we look at this from a compassionate perspective, we have to understand that we as health. I'm getting feedback.
Yeah, I don't know. Hold on. That should be fine now.
Okay, that's better.
You were saying.
Okay, so where was I? So we as health professionals are trained throughout our education to trust certain sources of information. And we have this training because there were agencies put into place long ago that were designed to benefit the population with the most current credible evidence, the latest science, right? Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to be unbiased and impartial and benefit the public, right? So we can improve population health outcomes, right? Make people healthier. So when we get into the workforce, we work extremely long hours under very high stress. We work 12 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours. Physicians will do 24-hour shifts in ER, and the last thing we want to do when we get home is do research, right? Although we are very qualified because we can access medical databases and understand published articles, and then we can interpret the findings, and we are basically licensed to be able to educate the population with those findings. So for instance, if I'm working in emergency and I get a patient that comes in with respiratory distress and he has an illness I've never heard of before, I can't go take a course on it. I have to be able to look through my resources, find information on that disease, understand the drugs that they're on, and then give them optimal care, right? And this involves very quick research. So we have to know what sources of information are the most credible. And we have certain, go-tos. And these would be, health agencies that review the data for us and then keep updates, right?
So, and these are the health agencies, and they're the intranets for healthcare.
So intranet is within the agency itself, and those supply us with what we think is the most recent data. But even, I can go online or I can access a medical database, and I can find, there's certain agencies that we trust, right? So those are our go-to.
So let me interrupt you here, because mm-hmm. this is one of the key points. It's rarely discussed. RegWatch doesn't get an opportunity to discuss it much, and we do have, we have Dr. Mark Tyndall on quite a few times. Obviously, he's a medical doctor too, as well, public health. And I just recently asked him about the internal systems, where is it that the vaping industry needs to go to try to change definitions and stuff like that? Because it seems to be that the medical community is like lost in this archaic definitions of vaping. And if you go online and you look, like you said, like even just Medscape, or if you dig in a couple of even the publicly available databases on medical stuff, or the databases for journalists that cover medical issues, I mean, it's stuck 10 years ago. There is no doubt. And what I asked Dr. Tyndall, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this because it was just after his last appearance, and I asked him, where are doctors then getting their information if it's not for an intranet? And I was thinking about our conversation, Kellie Ann, when I was asking him about that. And he said to me, he goes, there really is no intranet for, in his mind, that's the one go-to. And I said to him, I go, please don't tell me that general practitioners are getting their information about vaping from the media. And his answer was, yeah, where they're getting their information from.
Well, they're people, right? And they live in the real world. So they have a Facebook page and they come across articles on their feed. They read newspapers, right? So the media is definitely a source of information that influences the opinions of health professionals, right? But we rely on certain credible sources, resources that we do our learning from. And I have looked at the intranet and the public sources that we trust. And in my opinion, there seems to be a disconnect between the evidence and what is being reported on those systems. But you have to understand that if I'm working a 16-hour shift or a 12-hour shift and I want to learn about vaping, I'm going to go to those sources, and that's the end, right? If this patient comes in and starts talking to me about, oh no, your information is incorrect, I'm not going to be as likely to believe them because I trust my sources.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. What about lobbying from public health pressure groups? So Canadian Cancer Society, Lung Association. I would imagine that they've got people that are in hospitals or at the health units or, at that level, right? Like Fraser Health and that kind of thing, where they're putting their two words in.
Well, we would consider those credible sources.
Right.
So if I wanted to know about stroke, I would go to the Heart and Stroke page. That is considered to be a credible source of information. If I want to know about diabetes, I would go to the Canadian Diabetes Foundation and trust that they are keeping their information current. Right?
So they own credibility in the area.
They do to my colleagues, yes.
So obviously I'm hoping that the answer is going to direct me and the viewers to your website because I'm ready to go there. Okay. How exactly then does this industry that believes it is saving lives, right? This industry believes it's saving lives in the millions, right? Yes. If that's the case, why is this disconnect there then with the very people whose jobs are to save lives and help prevent illness?
And this is exactly my greatest concern. Why is there a disconnect between the evidence and health professionals, the evidence and public, the evidence and nonprofits, health-related nonprofits and CDC and et cetera? There seems to be an overtone of a narrative that like significant data is being dismissed and not mentioned. For instance, youth smoking rates since vaping has been introduced. We have seen a drop in youth smoking rates that we haven't seen since 2003. I mean, this is 19% drop in smoking rates in 2 years is crazy high, and yet this is considered to be significant. Yet it's not even being mentioned. So important data seems to be omitted, and then an important new credible evidence such as the research on vaping. You just changed the screen. Oh, sorry. Like the research on vaping is not being shared. And then I hear like a very read over and over a slant towards a narrative that isn't backed up by science, but word choicing and messages seem to be interwoven into these articles that provoke fear. And even concerning also is that the terminology is not being used correctly. They should be very clearly identifying tobacco harm reduction as something different than using a vaping device to use illegal drugs. But it seems like they're being grouped together, and that's a misleading message.
Yeah, and we're showing some of that in a crawl, some images right beside you from some of the headlines that have been out there, including in Canada, where the vaping illness was moving to Canada. It was coming anytime soon. It was totally teed up on its way here. Let's go over to the computer here, and there's us doing a little feedback loop. I prepared for us a little bit of a links here to walk us through some of the Canadian coverage that came out during September and into a little bit of October. And so just want to get your thoughts on it, and you've got this and you can see it, but Health Canada warns vaping carries risk of pulmonary illness.
Yeah.
And that was Global's coverage, but when you read the actual information update, it's not quite what Global was describing. I voiced this actually to the senior communications person at Health Canada just days after. So this is September 5th, so early in this whole process. Mm-hmm. And, Health Canada is warning Canadians that vaping products can carry this risk, right? And when the media organization starts to speak for the health agency, it always gets more definitive, and that's the danger, right? And more fear-mongering, because that's how you write. And that's one of the things at RegWatch, what we have to do is struggle with that all the time, Do we write like mainstream news media? If we wrote like mainstream news media, we'd be fear-mongering like all day long. It would be unbelievable. We'd be literally saying that the CDC has blood on its hands, and we'd be saying that every day, all day. CDC has blood on its hands. And by the way, that's what got me banned from Facebook.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
It's been brutal, man. You lose touch with people, and all of a sudden it's just like, I've had that before because I got a really crappy personality when I drink, but sober.
Don't drink on video.
Well, that's right. Don't drink. Well, I don't drink anymore.
Oh,
so
good.
yeah. So so this is. Right off the bat, Global and all of the media, completely ran with the hysteria, and we won't jump into Health Canada here right off the bat. I want to just do the headlines. People across the U.S. are sick, maybe because of vaping. What's going on?
Yeah. And
this is Canada. We've legalized, nicotine vaping products. We know what they are by definition. Mm-hmm. And these reporters know better, if you ask me. So, and this one just really got me. And so this was September 11th. So the same day our good friend, Mr. Trump, virtue signaled all over vaping in one big, huge so only a matter of time before Canada sees severe vaping-related issues, the BC Health Authority. It's like waving a white flag going, hi, the epidemic's on its way, hello. And then, so what did you, what were you thinking as they were rolling up the fear into Canada?
Well, haven't we been watching fear-mongering for years when it comes to vaping? The problem I see is they're not differentiating between tobacco harm reduction and using a vaping device to use illicit drugs. They're not distinguishing between the two. If they want to sell newspapers, I would think, maybe a positive message would sell papers too, which is that we found a solution to the number one most preventable cause of disease and death in Canada. Right? That would be a great message. Wouldn't that be great headlines? But there seems to be some sort of narrative or that's being dictated, or a collaboration between government and agencies, that they are erring on the side of caution to an extreme, that they are oppressing a significant harm reduction strategy for the most addictive substance in Canada, and kills 45,000 Canadians every year, and 1.1 million people suffer with smoking-related diseases, and it costs the taxpayers, $16 billion every year, which is about $9 billion short from the tobacco taxes they are collecting. So, this is a huge social cost to the Canadian people, not to mention the suffering, that 100% preventable suffering, not only of, the patient, but their family members as well. I mean, you get a man in his 50s that's been smoking for 30 years that suddenly has COPD, and he can no longer work his job, and then his kids don't go to college. Now, we can prevent this. We can prevent this, right? This is something that we should be celebrating. And yet that message is being lost in this fear-mongering and omission of very significant data that the public has a right to know.
It seems that they completely refused to recognize that they've pushed themselves past the limits of sanity.
I don't know if I can.
Well, you'd have to think about it, because if they're public health professionals and they're refusing to recognize that this has got life-saving potential,
yes.
And indeed they're forcing people back to smoking, and they've even recognized it. Stanton Glantz even said that, well, probably better off smoking.
I don't think the vast majority of people in the health professions are deliberately deceiving anyone. I think they are as misinformed as the public, and they have a right to know the information as well. But you have to understand, and I can speak from experience, when you are better educated than your colleagues and your profession and your, it can make you rather unpopular, because you're not, you're not sticking with the status quo, and that's challenging the system. And if healthcare professionals understood as well as I do how misinformed they are about tobacco harm reduction, they would probably have the same reaction that I did. And after I did my initial research on vaping, I did go through a period of depression, because if I can't trust the sources I was trained to trust, then where do I get my information from? And that leaves us in a very vulnerable position, because all of us, or the vast majority of us, want to do the best we can for our patients. We work tremendous hours and put our heart and soul into our work. And to think that we may be misinformed and misguiding people and inadvertently harming people, is a very difficult thing to come to terms with. So, we're challenging their security for information if we state that the information they're getting is incorrect or incomplete. And that can be very distressing for somebody in healthcare.
So if you have an eyes wide open moment and realize that the information you're getting from all of your reliable, trusted sources in medicine are lying, right? Or misleading, or the word is eliding. Eliding is the nice way to frame when somebody is just leaving stuff out. So it could either be leaving stuff out, it could be misleading, or it could be outright lying, right? And
which is what I see, yeah.
Which is what you see. So when that happens, and then you try to address it, and you get the machine of government medical system slamming down on you, and union and colleagues and everything else happening, well, so then does that not mean then that you have to shut off a part of your brain, a part of your ethics, a part of your soul to continue in that job?
Well, if we come out of school with tremendous debt. We've invested many years of our lives into becoming these professionals, and many of us do it because it's our passion. We want to keep those jobs. And, I could, without giving details about my personal experience, I can tell you that someone who would be in that position and challenging the status quo can expect gag orders from their employers, and that's a possibility where they're not allowed to cite any credible evidence. They're not allowed to share their anecdotal experience. They may be allowed to give like one internet source. And then I learned WordPress.
Sounds like this is a very specific example.
Well, these are just examples of things that can happen, and it can, to lose your ability to care for patients, to lose the context of working with wonderful people in the health community. There's a lot you will compromise. And that sometimes can be in contradiction with our code of ethics, which requires, I can't speak for other professions, but I know my professional code of ethics extremely well. I've read it many times. It's highlighted in 2 colors, and I think it's the highest calling of conduct that I could walk as a human being. And I hold that code of ethics very dearly. Every word I've ever written, every thing I've ever created for VAEP has been with my code of ethics in mind. I'm here in service to human beings, and it has been at great personal, financial, and professional cost. But if anybody ever thinks that I'm doing this for financial gain, they're very wrong.
Well, same thing for RegWatch lately, I'll tell you that right now.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's not fair. You're a great voice. I just want to tell you, Brent, I admire your work. You have tremendous courage. And I wish you were mainstream, and I hope you get there, because we truly need investigative reporting that is truthful. I'm starting to question so many sources of information that are very well funded, because they seem to be repeating a narrative, and it makes me very concerned about what else is a narrative. And sources like you, who really do look for the truth, is what the public desperately needs. Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate that, Kellie Ann, for sure. And let's bust a narrative here, and it's one that I don't believe yet has fully been discussed. And so, okay, so you may not agree. Actually, I'm certain you're not going to agree. This is pretty out there, okay? But let's try to bust this narrative.
Okay.
Once my eyes are wide open, when this vaping-related lung disease happened, what I'm meaning is when they called it a vaping-related lung disease, I went instantly, the first time I read, we're talking like mid-August, I read that's narrative right there, right? What does that mean? Well, it means totally a bunch of things they don't know. It's nothing, it's just we're calling it vaping-related. And I went, oh my God, that's smoking-related lung disease. That's smoking-related disease. And I went, oh my God, they're doing it right now with vaping-related lung disease, vaping-related disease. You might as well just call it that.
Right.
And then, yeah, and so here's the deal: they're completely lying, and obfuscating, conflating, sticking things together, running with the narrative. It spills out everywhere, and I just went, well, wait a minute. Well, what the hell is smoking-related disease then either? Because it's just some big grab bag. There's cancer, and then there's smoking-related disease. And so, and now knowing that the whole secondhand smoke research is a complete wash, which was the research that allowed government to take away people's liberties, because that's the precautionary principle. You're harming other people with your smoking, so now we can take it away from you. And that's the narrative that they're pushing with this. Here they know the science for vaping. There's just no way. They've tried secondhand vape. There's just no way, right? But with the teens, And that's why they're hammering it home so much there. It's because they're underage, because the vaping, the devices, the flavors are harming the kids, then that's the reason that they can take the liberty away from adults. Without that, they don't have the reason to do it. My concern is vaping-related lung disease has got some similarities to smoking-related disease. And that's a whole grab bag that you open that rat's nest, what are you going to see? Because one thing, they clearly think that smoking-related disease is less harmful than vaping-related disease. That's exactly what they're saying.
Well, I mean, we are well versed on smoking related diseases, and they come into three categories. We have a shareable on that. It's respiratory cardiovascular diseases and cancer. Those are the three major diseases that are categories that are caused from smoking. You know, there are stats on secondhand smoke causing deaths and disease. I've read conflicting evidence on that. I do know that smoking, you know, can be very exacerbatory towards, you know, respiratory problems such as asthma, etc.
Well, my point there, Kelly, is that Kellie Ann, is not that there is something that they're lying about smoking-related disease, but they could very well. They seem to be very capable of being loose with the truth, right?
Well, you know, they're not differentiating between tobacco harm reduction and people using illegal drugs in a vaping device, and they're lumping them together. But this is just a continuation of the, you know, claim that there's a youth epidemic. Like 65% of youth drink, right? And 33 have tried a vaporizer. Where's your epidemic? 4,300 American youth die every year from excessive drinking, but 0 have died from vaping regulated nicotine e-liquid, right? But they're not taking the flavors away from alcohol, right? Because it's something that attracts adults, just like the flavors in e-liquid attract adult smokers, right? So I think things have been very inflated. This epidemic is, you know, I think it's an incorrect term used for the current situation, and it's designed to provoke fear. But before that, it was the gateway effect, and we just did another shareable on that because, you know, there was an agency that claimed that nicotine leads to smoking, okay? But we've had a 19% decrease in youth smoking since vaping has been introduced. So that is absolutely untrue.
So let's do this, Kellie Ann. While you're talking, I'm going to navigate everybody over to your website because we've yet to do that.
Okay.
And I want you to keep going on this. So why don't you? I'm going to go to the shareables page here, and then direct me as we're going here. Is the shareables in education? Is that where it is?
If you could just go to the home page, you can find a link to shareables right off the top, the front of the page. There, it's just below the Facebook ads thing. And I'm wondering if I uploaded these yet to the site. I cannot. The workload far exceeds my waking hours, and I'm behind on everything.
Yeah, so I'll scroll through this. You were saying in terms of the data on teen vaping and smoking.
Yeah, so we're seeing like a significant decrease in teen smoking. Like that should be something that we're looking at objectively. If they're increasing vaping, but their smoking is dropping. Now then we have to compare the two products. We don't want teens vaping. We also don't want them eating Tide Pods and sniffing glue either. But we don't. You know, 78% of them have watched porn. You know, we're going to take the color out of porn, right? Like, this is normal adolescent behavior. They experiment with adult taboos. It's part of that transition into becoming an adult. They shave before they have whiskers. They wear high heels before their feet are big enough. They're experimenting into this new transition into their development. The problem is that young people, until we're about 23, the last part of the brain to develop is the frontal lobe. This is the part of the brain that can look into future situations and say, if I do this, this is going to be the outcome. Or it looks at past experience and says, well, the last time I did this with my bike in a jump, I broke my leg, right? But that sort of judgment is impaired or not fully developed until a human being is about 23, 24. And this is why virtually all smoking starts when it's during teens. So 93.3% of smokers have their first cigarette in their teens. I just saw that Cheryl come by. Right there. Yeah, that one. See, first cigarette at 15 years old, smoking daily by 18. So I wrote a page called Youth and Vaping. It really explains the process of how a smoker is made. So we have to understand that tobacco cigarettes have up to 600 chemicals. So there's your epidemic, right? That's in the U.S. Those are U.S. stats. The brown one is the Canadian one. So everything we make for Canada, we make for the U.S. when I get the time. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So all these chemicals are added to tobacco cigarettes, and they have been tested by, very well-funded scientists to experiment with adding different chemicals to make cigarettes the most addictive substance in Canada. And it's the most preventable cause of disease and death in Canada. It kills 2 out of 3 users, okay? So when we compare that as 100% risk, and then we look at the ingredients of what's in tobacco harm reduction and regulated nicotine e-liquid, we drop that risk down to 5%, okay? And what's very important to understand too is that pure nicotine is about 3 times less addictive than tobacco cigarette smoke. That said, I have met many young people when I've been in vape shops that are using nicotine salts, which make nicotine more bioavailable. And these are very, very important products for those smokers who can't transition off of cigarettes using just pure nicotine, okay, and regular e-liquid. The nicotine salts they deliver the nicotine more like a cigarette does. And this is extremely important for those heavy smokers who need that same sensation while they detox off the other 7,000 chemicals, right? And we can transition them into a nic salt, and then where they go from there. They've already dropped their risk by 95%. I mean, compare that to seatbelts. Seatbelts are a 50% drop in risk, right? Like, this is a significant harm reduction strategy. So when young people, because they, don't find adults going, hey, let's try, eating Tide Pods, or let's try smoking if they're a non-smoker, because they're an adult and their frontal lobe is finished developing and they can see what the outcomes would be, and they don't want to do the behaviors. So that's why addiction starts in those young years, right? So,
kids like drugs.
Well, here's the thing, like on my youth and vaping page, I do go into some solutions besides banning, what makes harm reduction attractive to adult smokers. When we're in adolescence, we have difficulty managing life. We have a lot of stressors like divorce and peer pressure and, no privacy and, so many things. And we may lack the skills to cope, so that when they use a vape device that's got like salt nicks in it and they take too much and give themselves like an overdose, where they get symptoms like nausea, headache, or they feel lightheaded, this is actually called a heady amongst youth usage. It's a very important sign that these young people are having difficulty coping. So instead of trying to stop their behaviors, maybe what we should be doing is offering them resources to deal with their stressors. Okay, so we instead of spending millions of tax dollars making smokers afraid of harm reduction, perhaps another way to better invest that money would be like an online resource that attracts young people to it, because they're getting into these behaviors, they're juuling. So why don't we invite them into a resource that can take them through some qualifying questions? So if we have little Susie and she's 14 and she's very social and she loves to talk to people, and her parents are going through a divorce and she's having a great deal of difficulty managing that, and she tried a juul, just like, you know, her friends are trying juuls, but only 0.1% of never smokers are vaping daily. That's an extremely small percentage. And these kids aren't picking up cigarettes, which are, you know, cigarette smokers have a 2.5% long-term quit rate. Once they're hooked, they're going to be a lifelong customer, and then they're going to be a big customer for companies that profit off of smoking related diseases, right? So maybe somehow we could take her through some qualifying questions, and it would match her with the right resources. So perhaps we give Susie the option, you know, of course with parental consent, of an online support group where she can use her social skills and talk to other kids that are going through divorces too. And then we give these kids coping mechanisms so they don't have a need to escape reality by abusing drugs. And we can circumvent new addicts at the point of conception by helping them, instead of just trying to punish, you know, smokers and not let them have tobacco harm reduction, right?
Fair enough. You know, just let me point out that the word punish, which is being applied to the smokers, needs to be applied to the kids, because you're describing more of the nanny state snowflake world, where government intervention in these little kids' lives to help them cope with the world. They need less coping mechanisms delivered by the government, and they need more parental whacking. Right.
Okay, but they're not getting that parental whacking because their parents are having trouble paying the mortgage and they're not home.
No.
Right, but we're not going to go into social issues.
Yeah, you and I, because just for all of our viewers to know.
But I mean, the Kantar resources go towards hooking up citizens with resources that benefit them. There are many out there, and it's part of my job as an RN.
So let's give the kids pagers then. Let's give the kids pagers.
No,
like sign up for, instead of it being like
maybe it's like you know, anger management course. There's nothing wrong with learning skills or getting support from our tax dollars to support our citizens, and it's just a suggestion. But
no, I know, but it's
the more proactive approach would be to help people at these moments of these opportunities for teaching, to empower them. That's what I do. When somebody comes into emergency and they have, you know, an issue with, say, gambling, I will, you know, find some research for them and say, here are some resources for you to help you with your problem if you're interested. I mean, why not? They exist. Sure. Why not hook them up with the people who need them?
And let's deal with that in a second. So, because I've got a feeling we're about to, you know, we're going to do about another 15 minutes or so here, and I want us to careen down this downhill slope here where we're going. Before we do that, I've just got to quickly send us over to Regulator Watch's support website. That's at support.regulatorwatch.com. And I want to make sure that we do a little bit of highlighting, because we have had some great supporters come in, small, a little bit big, that kind of thing, come in and help. They've kept the lights on for October. We are still desperately in need for November. We're hoping to get more monthly commitments. I think our U.S. number is like $500 a month. Yeah, you heard me, 500 U.S. for U.S. coverage a month. That's, guys, please. It's pain here, pain. And then, but Stealth in Canada came through for us with a great donation and supporting this video and a few more, and maybe hopefully more after that. And I really want to thank Mark and Mike and everybody that helped make that happen. And Stealth's a great company. I've known them now for a couple of years, since they first came into Canada. And we've got some monthly rock stars that have come on board and helping us out, and you don't need to do a lot to get up on this page. If you got $100 a month, put it in, get it in, PayPal or Stripe, that's fine. And we'll be happy to throw you up here and then try to pick your pockets more for later. And it's some great one-time heroes that have come in. So, and then of course, these are our legacy supporters, and I can't thank them enough. These are the companies that have made RegWatch happen for 4 years, and everyone's struggling. Some of these guys will be back, I hope, but it doesn't matter. I just can't thank everybody enough that has supported RegWatch, and these are great companies. And of course, Flavor Art has been our anchor supporter from almost day one. Oh, I got some news. Premium Labs might be coming back to help us out, which is great. Sammy Fogg, if you're out there, a little bit of a shout out. So there you go. So that's the business end of things.
Well, I would like to thank those businesses too, if I may.
Please.
I am horrified with the reputation that the vaping industry has been painted by authority. I would like to thank all of those mom and pop operations who have put their careers aside, put their life savings on the line because their lives have been changed by vaping. And they have chosen to open up shops to help their communities. In my opinion, these shops should be given awards for public health. They have helped thousands of Canadians stop smoking without one dime of tax dollars, and if anything, against tremendous oppression. And so, our country owes you a debt of gratitude, frankly.
Obviously you've got a lot of people you talk to across Canada and around the world about vaping, and specifically here in Canada. How's been the impact on the vape shops and the business? First, and then second, what do we know about the people that have stopped vaping and gone back to smoking?
I have talked to some shops that are beside 7-Eleven stores, and their customers, they're seeing go into the 7-Eleven stores and come out with cigarettes. Since this new narrative about vaping being dangerous has been so widely pushed, I think they're victims for doing good work for their communities.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I'm just having a vape, which I try to not do on camera as much as possible. Unless
I don't know when I'm on camera, so I kind of screwed here.
If I'm on somebody else's show, I'll do it. But on my show, I try to keep that for no other reason. It's just that I don't know. That's just the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's quite disturbing because the message has been clearly that. So I had one shop owner who's very, he's got, what's the right way to put it? He's in Ontario, very big shop. He might have more than one. Long-time member of the community. And, he was really upset. This was about 3 weeks ago. And he's had customers come in and say, hey, look, if I've got to roll the dice on my health, I just can't risk it with vaping. It's safer
horrible.
with smoking.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that message is coming from public health.
That message is coming from authority. Yes, it is. Yeah. My best advice is to go to VAEPworld.com and send your friends and loved ones there. Eventually we will, we have designed our learning materials so that they're very easy to understand. We start, children with picture books, right? And then they're attracted to the pictures, and then they'll move into words. That's why we start with picture books. Human beings learn in pictures. We don't learn in words. I heard every micrometer, there's like 20,000 pictures on that of our neurons, right? So we have designed our resources to be brightly colored. Oh, I have to fix that. Thank you. To be brightly colored and very succinct on one key concept. And then we provide the reference so that health professionals can look up the resources themselves and get the style of learning that they require. So when you look at a say a Facebook post and you look at all the comments underneath, what you'll find is there's a whole bunch of text, and then you'll see one of our shareables, and that's where the human's going to go. They're going to go to the color and they're going to engage, and that happens so fast that they won't have time to put up their cognitive dissonance and reject the information. They're cleverly designed so that they educate people despite their current misinformation and belief system.
So I'm just quickly doing a little bit of a Google search here. One sec. So, all right, because I want to do a quick contrast here if possible. There we go. Okay. So let's see here. You have, do we have you up? Yeah, there you go. And so, you know, we've got VAEP.
This is the youth and vaping page. This is extremely important for people to understand.
And then
it explains how smokers made, what the current narrative is, and then we offer suggestions for a more proactive solution.
Right. And so let's just contrast that with Health Canada's vaping site, right? So teen talk with your teen about vaping. Let's download the alternative format. So, I mean, here this is a different kind of message.
Yeah, the problem with this message is I think they're well-meaning in that they're just trying to make vaping scary, but they're giving that impression to adult smokers. And I think it's concerning because teenagers do have cognitive reasoning. If they read this and they deduct that this is inflated and fear-based and doesn't give a full message, then they're going to, their opinion of the source of that information, the credibility of that source is going to come under question, right? And they're not stupid.
They're not stupid, no. And I mean, and certainly could spark more use because they don't take the message seriously because their bullshit meter has gone off.
Well, also, you have to see, too, that the only images of teens vaping, like in a basement party handing a vape to each other, is coming from authority. Those images go into their mind, right? And it's almost glamorizing it from authority. It's a...
You're making a huge point here. You're making a huge point.
Not a very good image to give to young people if you want them to stop, Yeah,
the best marketing for Juul has been public health.
I'd have to agree with you, and I don't think that's their intention. Well, I don't know what their intentions are really sometimes because the message is. But then I can give Health Canada credit. I mean, the most recent severe lung illnesses related to vaping that they put out. They give some very good advice to not use illegal products. Yes, go to a vape shop, get regulated products. Don't tamper with your devices. They blow up. And they also say return to smoking if you are vaping nicotine-related products as a mean. Yeah, they say do not return to smoking if you're using nicotine-related products to quit smoking. That's very good advice. I wish they would give a little more reason as to why, but you have to give them credit. They're not telling people to go from harm reduction back to smoking. They're discouraging that, and that's a very responsible message.
Unlike what the CDC did for 6 weeks.
Well, yeah, the CDC, we have done a shareable on them. I've done shareables on Health Canada too. My initial intention for shareables were simply to share the credible evidence in picture form so people could understand it. But in the last few weeks, the majority of my shareables have been about calling out misinformation and individuals and their quotes. I didn't foresee things moving in this direction. I do believe that there should be accountability, and I'm unfortunately, we need to tell the truth. And sometimes that means the ugly truth, which is authority is not giving an accurate, full picture of the situation. So we are challenging authority. It's a dangerous thing for me to do, but I feel that, I've sacrificed so much already and lost so much already. I'm not going to stop telling the truth. And sometimes telling the truth means to correct incorrect information. Okay?
That's
I'd like to get back to the studies, if we may. If we could just
sure.
what I mean? No, I mean as in I would rather be making shareables on the evidence, on the scientific evidence, but I only have so much time. And this has been such an affront, like a collective collaboration to deceive the message, to make the message into something that it's not, that I felt compelled that I had to address these messages, right? But that said, Utah Department of Health seems to be a lone agency of all these thousands of agencies that's telling the truth. And I think I made 5 shareables on their very accurate and responsible message to the public. I would love to, I'm going to get a hold of them when this runs down a bit and just thank them so much for being truthful, because I was able to hold on to that and give that to the public. Okay.
It's strange that there's one isolated state there that seems to have common sense. I don't know. Are they Republican? Maybe is that state Republican?
I don't think it's a political thing, but what I don't understand is how thousands of reporters that are interviewing vapors and vape shops and getting the truth. How do these thousands of people edit their work to fit the narrative? Like, this collaboration is so far-reaching, and it's the average person who probably just wants to keep their job, and this is the narrative that they have to frame. And and I know from personal experience, if you don't, mindlessly follow the status quo, you single yourself out for attack, right?
Right. Well, as somebody who's been in the journalism profession for 30 years, I can tell you it's not always been this way. Part of it obviously is social media that really makes an impact, but I have to tell you there's a much more illiberal streak that it runs throughout society today, and young people suffer from it the most. And so they come out of journalism school, they get out of J school, they've come out taught that their job is to be an activist, because they've been taught that activism is the most virtuous thing to do since they were in kindergarten. I mean,
interesting.
If you look at K and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, those grades in British Columbia right now, because I'll use this as an example. I've gone through the curriculum, and activism is taught in grade 1. And it's just runs right through all of high school. So when you get into college, and then you're already radicalized for all intents and purposes. You may not look or feel it, but everything about what you think you should be doing is all related to activism.
Okay, but what is the activism? Like, does that mean you discover the truth and tell people? Or is that you follow the crowd? Because that's not activism, that's following.
No, that's right. Activism today is to take what authority tells you are the issues that you need to fight for, and then that's what they're educating you on.
Okay.
Inculcating you on, and then you get out and you fight for those issues.
So it's being an order follower and a narrative repeater. That's the terms I would give that, and that's really sad because that doesn't promote critical thinking.
No, and they're taught they're taught critical thinking, and they believe they're trained in critical thinking. And then they activate their activism towards the enemy, the opposition of the concepts that authority has told them they must run with. Because if they had true critical thinking, there'd be more pushback on a whole host of issues.
You'd question authority. But you said something interesting earlier. You said that this isn't the way it's always been, So that's a good thing, because that means we can go back, you see? That doesn't mean that this is in stone. We are a dynamic species, and we can adopt more healthy behaviors. And you said it was better 30 years ago, then we can adopt that again, right? That's hopeful.
Sure it is. But when you're talking about breaking the narratives, and, if you have millions and millions of people, whole entire generations that are trained to follow authorities, that only gets reversed in some pretty dramatic fashion.
Well, my hope, nobody likes to be played the fool. Right? Nobody likes to be taken for a ride. Nobody likes to be deceived. I don't care what you've been trained. My hope is that because vaping is a very easy proof. This is the thing. This is really easy to prove that it's a significant harm reduction strategy. And those that are oppressing harm reduction are leaving a very good history, and it's being well documented. So once we educate 35 million Canadians on the truth, my hope is that there will be outrage. And we will identify where the disconnect is between the scientific evidence and public knowledge, and we can correct it. We have to remember that every person has someone in their life that they care about that smokes. Okay, and this information has been available to us for at least 5 years. That's how long ago it was that I did my independent research, just reviewing the credible evidence. And when people understand that their loved ones may have had an option for 5 years, but they weren't given the information to make an informed decision about that, and their loved ones have now been diagnosed with a chronic disease or something, right? I hope that there will be outrage. I hope that Canadians will collectively stand up and said, we've had enough, right? And we want our system corrected so that it serves us. Because who is this serving, right? That's the question. Who does this serve? Well, smoking makes a lot of sick people. And sick people are very profitable. Okay, so when who is authority serving? Okay, I hope I didn't say too much.
Well, no, look, basically you're saying, and this is said by so many of RegWatch's viewers, endlessly, because there's got to be some truth to it, and that is the fact that people profit off of illness. And I don't think when you put it that way that sounds so outrageous. Of course.
It doesn't. And did you know that the pharmaceutical company has double the lobbying power on Washington, D.C. than oil and gas does? Like they weren't that big 30 years ago, right?
All I could say, Kellie Ann, is that I wish that just 2% of the energy that goes into the hysteria over climate change was applied to pro-harm reduction vaping. To maybe 1%. I bet you just 1% of climate change hysteria applied onto our side there would make a big difference, right?
I think that we need to take a compassionate approach. We don't have, VAEP is not fighting. We don't fight. We empower people with knowledge, right? We don't have enemies. We have misinformed people who need our help. Right? These agencies, the vast majority of those people, I think they believe they're doing what's right because it's based on the information that they're having or they're being given. Okay. And I would invite them to go to vaepworld.com and just look at the evidence. Okay. Just look at the evidence.
Well, that's really good. And I think this is a good place for us to wrap. Kellie Ann, it's been fantastic having you on the show. And it seems that we managed to get through without like a drop down.
Well, I'll talk to you privately after. We'll have some fun.
Absolutely. Well, so you just said your URL. That is great. That's vaepworld.com.
Yes, and it just so happens that I'm dyslexic too, so it's very appropriate that my project's named Vape spelt wrong.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's actually
That's
pretty
true.
good. Well, good luck to you. And for our viewers, please, again, before you go and head off, go to support.regulatorwatch.com and consider contributing monthly or a one-time contribution. That'd be great. I want to thank Stealth for being a great supporter for RegWatch, and hopefully shall continue. And that's it. I hope you guys all have a great evening, and please vape them if you got them.